Valencia versus Barcelona, gluten-free beer, and to bread or batter your bacalao. This week, we're dining in Lisbon with city nerd Ray Delahanty.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is where we explore the great cuisine of the world at destinationeatdrink.com and here on the Destination Eat Drink podcast. And this week, we're at a Lisbon restaurant called Rice Me with Ray Delahanty, creator of the YouTube channel City Nerd. We talk about his urbanism and the food he's enjoyed in Spain and Portugal as he's traveled through the Iberian Peninsula for the last 3 months, including the monster sandwich he tackled in Porto.
Called Francesina's, which
Yes.
is
the monster sandwich.
Yeah, I had to do it. Right?
8,000 calories per serving.
Oh my gosh. What is it? So it's 2 huge pieces of bread. Does it have port wine in it?
First, topped with cheese.
Yeah,
Melted cheese
I wasn't sure
on
if the
top.
cheese was before or after the other stuff.
And
but
then
yes,
on
yes.
top goes depending on where you go, is like a spicy tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Some of them make it with a beer, maybe with the port wine. I'm not sure. It's been a while. It's been a few years since I've had one. But
That's about the amount of time you need in between them, I think, to recover.
to fully digest it, to run through your system.
Right.
All that's coming up in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy Destination Eat Drink, do me a favor and give us a 5-star review. It really helps the show reach a wider audience, and thank you so very much. Ray Delahanty is the brains behind the great YouTube channel City Nerd. His videos about urbanism, city planning, livability, and the insanity of car dependence routinely rack up 250,000, even 500,000 views on YouTube. I'm a fan. I watch all his vids when they come out, and what I think makes City Nerd so popular is Ray's down-to-earth, laid-back style that is both approachable and self-deprecating. It's also a wealth of info. So when I found out Ray was coming to Portugal, I invited him to lunch in Lisbon, and Ray told me, sure, but that he's gluten-free. So we went to a restaurant called Rice Me, a place I've wanted to visit for quite a while, but hadn't got to yet. So this was a great opportunity. And Ray and I sat down and ate and talked about city planning and urbanism, a topic I've been very interested in since moving to Europe and digesting this different way of life, especially when it comes to my daily interactions with the city where I live, namely living without a car and navigating that lifestyle. Of course, Ray and I also talk a lot about food. He's got a unique take on travel since he's gluten-free, so we talk about how he deals with being GF while on the road, as well as some of the delicious dishes he's enjoyed traveling through Spain and Portugal, including a great meal that we had together at Rice Me. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Ray Delahanty, City Nerd. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. It's great to have you face-to-face in person here in Lisbon.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks.
So I should tell people, first off, we are at this cafe in Lisbon called Rice Me, and we're sitting outside on the patio. It's next to a fairly busy street, so folks are going to hear traffic noise. That's just part of being live here, but I love doing these live one-on-ones, not doing it over Zoom, not doing it over Skype. We're sitting here face-to-face, and we're going to be enjoying a meal together, so thanks for doing this while you're in town.
Yeah, and what better way to do it than with the sounds of the city behind us, right?
Yeah, exactly, because you call yourself an urbanist, and I'm curious as to how you define that term urbanist. What does it mean to you?
It's an interesting question because I myself did not know what it meant or hadn't formulated my own definition until probably several months after I'd started working on my channel. And this is coming from someone who, I have like 15 years of background in, urban planning and traffic engineering. And so I'd heard the term urbanist before, but not in the way that you typically hear it used now. And so what I quickly discovered as my channel grew was that, yes, there was this subculture of people who call themselves urbanists. And kind of the way I think of it is an urbanist is someone who thinks of the city as kind of an ideal form for human settlement and human organization. It's more efficient on a per capita basis for things like transportation, water, sewer, electricity. People who live in dense cities tend to emit less CO2, those kinds of things. So that's kind of my working definition of urbanist, but it isn't necessarily the definition. I think it you'll get 100 different definitions from 100 different people if you ask them.
So you talk about efficiencies when you talk about, economies of scale and things like that. But what about this idea of also livability and walkability and access for the people who actually live in the city?
Yeah, I mean, all those things go together. So when you talk about transportation efficiency, if I want to go to the grocery store, or if I want to go to the library, or I need to go to the doctor, if you live in a dense city neighborhood, there's a good chance you're going to be able to walk to all those things, which is great in a number of ways. You're not putting more traffic on the street. You're not emitting more CO2. You're getting some exercise. So there are all kinds of benefits that come with having walkable neighborhoods, and you can call that livability and quality of life. I would see it that way. I don't necessarily want to impose my values on people who might not think of a walkable area as more livable, but I think it's a fair way to think of it.
And we're in Lisbon here, and I'm looking right across the street. There's the metro stop. I mean, it's literally, 100 feet away from us, the entrance to the metro stop. I don't live in Lisbon. I live in a small city that's, 45 minutes to an hour away from here. But when I came out here this morning, super easy to get to. I walked to the bus/train station, the transport depot in my town, hopped on a bus. I could have hopped on a train. They're both coming up this way. And then from there, hopped on the subway, the metro, popped out here, and I'm literally steps away from the place that we were going to meet. And that, to me, is the big difference about now living in Portugal. You talk about ease of use. We live in a small city. There's about 100,000 people in the city where I live, yet we don't have a car. We walk literally to the green market every day. It's a 10-minute walk from our apartment. We walk to bars and restaurants. Every place we walk because we don't have a car. So I think this is what, so we're splitting semantic hairs when we talk about urbanism versus livability versus walkability. It all kind of goes into the same Venn diagram, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And, the difference you outlined there that's kind of a crucial one. If you think about cities the size of Lisbon that are in the U.S., they're going to be a bit all over the map in terms of whether you can actually use subways or elevated trains or what we call grade separated transit to get where you need to go. If you live in Boston or San Francisco or DC, which are maybe around the size of the Lisbon metro area, you're probably going to do okay. But if you live in Dallas or Houston, which I think are probably a bit larger than the Lisbon metro area, you're just not going to be able to use transit in any effective way. And that's doubly true or more when you talk about smaller cities that are outside the core city, like the one that you live in. My experience from having been traveling in Spain and Portugal in the last 3 months is that it's pretty easy to get to a smaller city outside of the core city on a commuter train or a regional train. They run frequently, they're fast, they're reliable. And, we do have commuter train networks in the U.S., but they're usually only in the very largest cities, and they usually don't run that frequently to where they're as convenient as what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. And when I came here today, I didn't have to plan ahead to be like, all right, I'm going to grab this train to this stop, and then I'm going to do this over here. I walked to the transit station, and I knew whatever was there, whatever the next thing that was leaving, bus or a train, I'm agnostic. I don't care. And I really didn't even care which part of the city it came to because I could hop on the metro, and I knew I could get here pretty easily. And I want to talk about your experience being in Portugal and being in Spain. But first, I want to talk about North American cities, because on your YouTube channel, City Nerd, you spend a decent amount of time railing on the city design of North American cities, of their livability, of their walkability, etc. Oh, here comes some of our food. Terrific. Thank you.
Fantastic.
We got our covert. Ah, beautiful.
Yeah,
Lovely.
super. And this is gluten-free, huh? Wow. That works great.
Beautiful.
Wow. Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to let you look at this for a second, but I did want to answer this question real quick before we dig in here. You spend a lot of time criticizing North American cities, so I'm curious, what do North American cities do particularly well, and what do they, if anything, and what do they do particularly poorly?
Yeah, I mean, my inclination is to be kind of sarcastic about the first half of that question. I mean, American cities are pretty good if you're determined to have a car and accomplish all your errands by car, no matter how short or long the trips are. America is going to be pretty good for you. People complain about traffic, but I haven't really seen traffic in U.S. cities that matches a couple of the instances I've seen since I've been over here in Spain and Portugal. The streets are built relatively wide, and parking is pretty abundant. You'll hear people complain about parking in the U.S. I don't see anywhere near the parking issues in the U.S. that you would have if you were trying to park your car at home in, say, Valencia, where every street face that allows parking is just jam-packed with cars that are parked bumper to bumper, and sometimes, in some cases, double parked. And you don't see anything like the amount of surface parking lots in European cities than what you see in the U.S. In the U.S., we use enormous amounts of our real estate for just the storage of personal vehicles. That's kind of I guess that's more my criticism of the U.S. transportation system. It really has been designed around the automobile, with people who are walking or taking transit or biking, are kind of afterthoughts that try to get, the agencies try to accommodate them after the fact, but that's not really any way that you can do transportation planning. As far as what U.S. cities really do well, as far as transportation and livability, it's really hard to say. There are U.S. cities I really enjoy being in. New York is great. I even enjoy being in Los Angeles to a certain extent. Some of the neighborhoods are great. There are some great locations within otherwise objectionable cities you can live in. But that's kind of the problem, is you have to be in very specific areas in order to live a life car-free and, to be able to walk to accomplish your daily errands. Whereas in Spain and Portugal, in Spanish and Portuguese cities, you're more likely to be able to do that just about anywhere.
Well, Ray, I've tortured you long enough. I'm going to let you dig in.
We can talk. I mean, I don't know if we talk about what we're eating here,
Oh, yeah,
whatever,
definitely.
But, so one thing that's very, very difficult to find, and we can talk about this, but it tends to be central to my trip planning, is trying to find really cool gluten-free dishes that I've never had before, like things that I haven't been able to eat for 18 years, because that's how long I've been diagnosed as gluten intolerant. And one of those things is fried fish, like really good fried fish. And I've been able to find it a couple times on this trip. And now I've got something really good looking in front of me. It's bacalhau, which is codfish,
right?
Fried sort of like fish and chips style, but well, I'll just have to bite into it because always got some herbs and
so give it a try, and I'll describe to folks what we're talking about. So, like I said, this restaurant's called Rice Me, and I'm not sure the dish you got, but it's bacalao, pastel de bacalao, basically.
Yeah.
And so if you imagine, you've got the bacalao, which is the codfish, and then it's kind of minced, and then usually they'll add an egg, and then they'll bread it and deep fry it.
Yeah. See, no, I didn't know that was coming. I thought it was a breaded, battered piece of fish, but yeah, it's like it's a minced preparation. Oh, this is delicious. Yeah, and you often, if you do manage to find some sort of fried fish or other kind of fried food, it tends not to be fluffy or pillowy like this at all. So this is really interesting and really good.
To me, that also looks different than the ones that I normally see, which are more, that looks more like a tempura batter. Mm-hmm. Whereas normally you see them breaded, mm-hmm. like if you imagine like a rice ball or something like that you might get in Italy, an arancini. That looks more like a tempura. So it's a little bit of a different spin than you might see at a traditional Portuguese restaurant, right. But it looks very, very good. I'm glad you're happy with it.
I am. Yeah, like I said, I often organize my travel itineraries, not like my whole trip or like which city I'm going to go to, but when I get to a city, I try to identify places that have interesting gluten-free items that are just hard to find. Keep in mind, I spent the last year living in the Las Vegas area in the U.S., which has a great restaurant scene, but it's got a really terrible scene for people who are gluten intolerant, which just kind of surprises me because there should be a ton of variety there, and there is, but just not for people who are gluten intolerant. I spent the previous odd number of years in Portland, Oregon, which is fantastic for gluten-free eating. They have great gluten-free breweries, great bakeries. They had a fried fish place that I was a huge fan of for many years. So when I travel, I try to identify these places and give them a shot, and then they kind of become really treasured memories of the places I've visited.
Nice. So how have you found Portugal and Lisbon specifically for gluten-free dining? Because it was, like we talked about, the pastel de bacalhau, breaded. Mm-hmm. Bread is such an important part of the Portuguese diet. I would imagine it's not all that easy.
Yeah. It's been a little tougher in Portugal than it was in Spain, to be honest. And part of it, I think, is a little bit the food culture, although the Spanish do enjoy having bread with just about every meal as well. But the awareness seems a little bit higher in Spain than it is in Portugal. And then the other item, how do you pronounce the pastéis de nata?
Pastel de nata.
Pastel. Those are, those are on the must-try list for anybody who comes to Portugal, I would think. But it's extremely hard to find a gluten-free one, or maybe a good gluten-free one. Did manage to find one at, is it Zarzuela, I think, done by Caixa Sodra, the train station to Castle.
Right down by the river.
Yeah. And so that was good. I got a couple of those. Those were tasty. But yeah, it's been hard to find those places. It's been hard to find. I did find a gluten-free bakery, but they didn't really make a variety of bread. It was more pastries and kind of heavy dessert items, and I like those. But often when I'm traveling, I'm looking for like some sort of gluten-free bakery that just makes baguettes and croissants and rolls, and maybe some sweeter things too. But haven't really identified that in Lisbon yet.
We got a gluten-free bread here with our meal, and it's not bad. I've also had gluten-free rice bread at a place called Organi Chiado, which is a nice place. I really enjoyed it there. So It's out there. It's definitely not common. It's not something that you'll find typically here in Lisbon. Any other dishes that you found besides bakery type, dessert type stuff that you've had in Lisbon that you really liked?
Yeah, I mean, I love seafood and rice. I mean, it's hard to go too wrong with that. They can introduce wheat flour into a stew, so you have to watch out for it a little bit. But I think I do like octopus. So I had was it octopus, Azores Island style, which was kind of like a tomato paste / broth. It's a little spicy, not too spicy. And that was very good. Had that done in the district. I can't remember exactly where that was. But that was delicious. So you can't go too wrong with seafood, and I do love seafood. I would say I did do a week in Porto before coming to Lisbon. I managed to find a restaurant that makes gluten-free, I think they're called Francesinas, which is a...
The monster sandwich.
Yeah, I had to do it. Right?
8,000 calories per serving.
Oh my gosh. What is it? So it's 2 huge pieces of bread, and so they do it gluten-free. They've got gluten-free bread, and then I don't know what all it's got on it. It's got like some sort of steak, like a sirloin, like kind of medium thin sliced sirloin. It's got Portuguese sausage on it, and then I think it's also got a ham on it. I don't know. It's got, and it probably isn't completely consistent from place to place, but it's got at least 3 layers of like heavy meat on it.
Yes.
And then, but it's in a bath of like boiling. Does it have port wine in it?
First topped with cheese.
Yeah,
melted cheese.
I wasn't sure if
top.
the cheese was before or after the other stuff.
And
but
then on top goes depending on where you go, is like a spicy tomato sauce.
Yeah.
And that's, if you talk to people from Porto, like that's the differentiation between it. It's like where you go. A lot of people say where you go depends on which sauce you like on top. Like the meat is almost secondary because you know you're going to get this giant stack of meat on it. It's really about what your preference is for that sauce. So some people like it a little spicier. Some of them make it with a beer, maybe with the port wine. I'm not sure. It's been a while. It's been a few years since I've had one. But
that's about the amount of time you need in between them, I think, to recover.
To fully digest it, to run through your system.
Right.
All right. Now it's been 4 years. Now I can go back. Actually, we are going to Porto soon with my brother. So I'm sure I'm going to get another one of those monsters. Luckily, there'll be 3 of us. We can split it 3 ways.
You
and
kind of have to.
It'll only be like 1 day's worth of caloric intake for us.
Well, for several days, I think I was walking by cafes and seeing people eating these things. And also the smaller sandwiches. What are they called? The
Bifana.
Bifanas, yeah. And they also had gluten-free ones of those, too. I got to try that. They're much more modestly sized and manageable. But I spent several days walking by and seeing people eating these enormous, crazy sandwiches. I'm like, I just kind of feel left out. I got to do it. So I did it. And, I don't think I ate anything the rest of the day.
No, you couldn't. There'd be no way.
Insane. That's putting a lot of, that's a lot to ask of your digestive system.
Yeah.
But delicious.
So how did you find Porto from an urbanist standpoint? Because we were there in 2019, and I thought the transit was really good there. Porto's not as big as Lisbon, but I found it pretty user-friendly, although we did do a lot of walking there. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, so I release a video every Wednesday on my YouTube channel, City Nerd. And this I don't know if your episode will come out before or after. Oh, I guess that's tomorrow. Wednesday, wherever we are, the last Wednesday of April. So it's gonna focus on Porto and transportation, but also tourism, I think. But I did ride the Porto Metro quite a few times. It's what we actually call it's a light rail system, meaning for the most part it operates at grade, like on arterial streets, and so it has to cross at traffic signals, things like that. So it has to interact with regular vehicle traffic to a certain extent, which is not optimal, but it's also usually appropriate for a city the size of Porto, which is, I don't know, like 1.5 million in the metro area. That's usually smaller than the point where you'll see like a fully grade separated metro, like a subway or an elevated train. But the thing about the Porto system, and you will see this sometimes, but they did underground it through the center of the city where you have the most congestion and the most bottlenecks. And so that makes it a lot more efficient and a lot more reliable than it would be if there was some way they ran it at grade, on the surface through downtown. So I was pretty impressed by that. And in the video I have coming out, I actually compare it to the light rail system I'm most used to, which is in Portland, Oregon, which does not run underground in downtown Portland. It runs at grade, and that's the source of a lot of delay. I wouldn't say necessarily unreliability, but they have to really slow the schedule down to accommodate the amount of traffic signals and stops that they accommodate in the downtown area. And there have been years of discussion about what would it take to put the light rail underground in Portland. And I just find it very funny because a city like Porto has so many more hills. And it's so much older of a city that likely has so many other archaeologically interesting things you could disturb underground. It should be much more difficult to build something like that in Porto. Yeah, they did it, but we can't do it in the U.S., even in a fairly progressive city like Portland.
Right.
I just find it interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking about this since we moved to Portugal because, like I told you before we turned on the microphones, Karen and I have been kind of vagabonds up until we landed in Portugal, and we lived in several U.S. cities, some of them better than others as far as urbanism goes. And one thing that I found was this constant argument in the U.S. that we can't create good public transit because of ... fill in the blank, whatever the reason is. The streets aren't big enough. We have to accommodate traffic. We can't, in Austin, we're not going to go underground. It's too expensive, blah, blah, blah. Then we get to Portugal, and in a place like Lisbon that's close to our house, in theory, this has all of those same arguments that you would have. It's an old city. The streets are way too narrow to accommodate it, blah, blah, blah. Yet, they're able to do it and make it extremely user-friendly. So it just kind of crystallized in my mind when we got here. Those arguments fall apart when you compare it to a place like Lisbon.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to understate what the differences are, either culturally or historically, between a country like Portugal and a country like the United States. One thing that you'll definitely notice is it's a lot more expensive to own and operate a car in European countries. The taxes are much higher. The fuel taxes are much higher. The licensing is more expensive.
And the tolls.
The parking is more difficult and I would think more expensive, although I'm not sure about that. And so that's kind of part of the equation too. It makes it harder to build political support for really high quality transit like you have in Lisbon, definitely, and somewhat in Porto, when you have people who are able to get around relatively easily and relatively cheaply with their cars. Although it's kind of debatable. I'm of the opinion that people don't necessarily account for the costs of driving correctly. They're kind of hidden. You pay monthly payments on your car, and then the monthly payments disappear once you pay your loan off, and you pay the insurance once a year. So when you drive, oftentimes the only time you notice a cost is when you're filling up at the gas tank, and you just don't notice all the costs of depreciation and maintenance and all the other things that go into it.
Yeah, and if you've got an easy pass, you're not digging money out of your pocket every time you use a toll. You only see it when your credit card bill comes, and maybe you kind of ignore that as well. I got to say, when we sold our car in the U.S. and came out here, we thought, well, we'll see how it goes. Because I've had a car since I was 16 years old. I've never been without a car my whole adult life. And we got here and we said, well, we'll see how it goes from a walkability, accessibility standpoint. I got to say, not only do I not miss having a car, I'm grateful not having a car, because these things I don't even think about. Where am I going to park it? How am I going to get from A to B? How much is it going to cost me? What about insurance? How am I going to register it? All of these hurdles that I'm going to have. No, I just go down to the bus station once a month and re-up my pass, and easy.
Yeah. It's interesting. On my social media, on my Instagram or Twitter, I kind of let people know what my travel plans are, and I post pictures of where I am. And I didn't get too much feedback when I was in Spain. I got people saying, hey, you should see this, you should see that. But man, when I let people know I was coming to Portugal, and Lisbon in particular, I had all kinds of folks living in the area or who are from Lisbon and live in the U.S. now, I guess, who said, oh, just don't come down too hard on us because we really love our cars in Lisbon. And I'm like, sort of, but have you been to the U.S.? Because it's just, it's night and day to me. Maybe Lisbon is relatively more car-centric compared to European cities. I don't know that it is. I've been to many European cities, and every European city, even a place like Amsterdam, people own cars, particularly if you live in the periphery of the city. But they're just treated differently. The streets are narrower. I find the drivers are more respectful of people walking than what I get in the U.S. When if I'm at a crosswalk, 9 times out of 10, probably more than that, probably 49 times out of 50, the car stops for me here in Lisbon, where it's more like 5 or 6 out of 10. Well, it depends where you are, but if you're in Vegas, it's probably like 1 out of 10 stops for you. But yeah, it's a night and day difference.
The way it was explained to me, because I had the same observation that you did, Ray, that drivers will stop for you when you enter the crosswalk. And Portuguese drivers kind of have this, I guess, I can't think of a place I've lived where this reputation is not, oh, the drivers are crazy here. Wherever you go, people are like, oh, the drivers are crazy here. Portuguese drivers have this reputation of driving very fast and having a certain amount of recklessness. But when I came here, I had the same observation that you did, where I said, wow, they stop for you when you're in the crosswalk. The way that it was explained to me from Portuguese people, and I heard this more than once, was they really clamp down on fining people if you don't stop for someone in the crosswalk. So now people are very conscious that, hey, you better stop or else it's going to hit you in the pocketbook. And like I said, we don't have a car. I'm walking everywhere. Pedestrians rule the day, especially where I live. In Lisbon, a little bit less so because it's more touristy, and I think there are a certain number of drivers who have had their last nerve frayed by tourists. Yeah. But where I live, like if you walk and someone doesn't stop, you'll let them know. And they will inevitably apologize. They'll be like, oh, sorry. You'll see them lean out the window. Oh, sorry, didn't see you, whatever. I've only had 2 occasions, and like I said, I'm out walking every day. I've only had 2 occasions where I had a bad encounter with a car. And that's out of thousands and thousands and thousands of crossing streets. So maybe folks... maybe folks are being a little bit more conscious of this, but also maybe folks are like, there's a different perspective because of the way that they've grown up and the way that they've lived their lives their whole entire life.
Yeah, there's a concept we talk about in urban planning, safety in numbers. And oftentimes we talk about that in terms of bicyclists. Like if you could just get more people out biking, they would be more visible. People would be more used to seeing them, and you'd get better outcomes with your transportation system. People would be less likely to not see a bike in their blind spot, for example. But I think that's doubly true for pedestrians, and it's something I think you can observe here. People here, I assume, probably grow up being able to walk everywhere and spending a lot more of their time being pedestrians. And if you live in a city like Lisbon, a lot of times you won't even own a car, or you won't primarily use a car to take care of your daily errands. So part of it is, I think, we call it safety in numbers, or you could just call it empathy, right? You grew up that way, you live that way, and so you have empathy for the person who's trying to cross the street in front of you. And I think that's missing in a lot of U.S. cities, because there are a lot of folks who live in maybe like a suburban area where it's really impossible to walk anywhere that you need to go. So you always drive, you're always behind the wheel. And so you don't have that natural empathy for other people. You're more likely to see them as an obstacle to where you want to go. Doesn't mean you're going to run them over, but you're going to be a little bit less patient and maybe not as forgiving of allowing someone to cross when they have the right of way, particularly when it's not enforced, like you mentioned.
Let's go back to Spain for a minute, because you said you spent, how long in Valencia were you there? It was more than a week, so it was quite a bit of time.
Whole month. Yep.
Whole month.
Yep.
Wow. And Valencia is a place I really want to go to. We just had friends who returned from Valencia, and they were just raving about it. How did you enjoy it? And then we'll talk a little bit about food from a food standpoint.
I'm afraid to answer this one because I don't want to blow Valencia's cover.
Okay. Because I thought you were gonna say something negative about it, because you had this look on your face like
I should. It's terrible and nobody should go there. How about that?
That was what it was like when we first moved to Austin. There were T-shirts that were like, "Welcome to Austin, don't move here" was one of my favorite T-shirts, and then another one was "Don't move to Austin. I hear Dallas is nice."
I'd put it this way about Valencia. It's a little further south and maybe a bit warmer than Barcelona. It's also like Barcelona in that it's on the Mediterranean and there are beaches. It's also like Barcelona in that it's got old Roman ruins and really charming old Gothic quarters, and neighborhoods. We would call it the Exemple. Valencia has the same kind of block setup that Barcelona has in certain neighborhoods. It's just it's very, very differently priced than Barcelona is.
Okay.
And it has, and this is the way, I don't know. This is a tough thing. It has many, many fewer tourists and expats than Barcelona. Right. And if I was a native Valencian, I would prefer to keep it that way, probably.
No one wants to turn into Barcelona.
No, I'm trying not to. Yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic about this, but I really did enjoy Valencia. It's not as easy to navigate if you don't speak Spanish or like Catalan, although people don't really speak Catalan there, although it's on all the signage. It's not as easy. Like Lisbon is fairly simple to navigate, I think. You don't really have to know Portuguese. I mean, it's appreciated, but lots of people speak English here. That's not true in Valencia. It is in particular quarters that are more often frequented by tourists, but in a lot of the neighborhoods, you better go in there knowing some Spanish. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to order food. They're not going to know what you're saying. And they might even, I don't know, they might perceive you as rude, although I found people pretty friendly there.
The way it was explained to me, the Portuguese say when so many of them know English because back in the day, all of the movies and TV shows that came over here were in the native language with subtitles. Whereas in Spain, they dubbed it into Spanish. So everyone learned English by TV and movies. And you talk to anyone who's like 40 and over, they'll tell that story again and again. And sure, you go into smaller cities and whatnot, even in our city, which is fairly big by Portuguese standards, there are a lot of people who don't speak English. And that's great because I get to practice my Portuguese. But for the most part, there is a much wider knowledge of English in Portugal, in Spain, which has been my experience and confirmed by folks who live there.
Yeah. I had it explained actually the same way by the guy who cut my hair. Before Porto, I spent a week in Tavira down on the Algarve coast. Guy cut my hair down there. He spoke completely flawless English. He joked when I walked in because when I made the reservation online, I had put a note that said, "I don't speak Portuguese." And he was like, "Nobody here speaks Portuguese." Well, at least in Tavira, it's a very tourism-oriented kind of beach community, although a very charming historic town in its own right. But he explained it the same way. He said, if you go to an American movie in Spain, it's dubbed. Same in France. In Portugal, it's in English with Portuguese subtitles. And I was like, would that really make that much of a difference? But he said he gave me the same story. And so a couple of days later, I said, hey, I'm going to go to the movies.
Right.
So I did. It's like, oh, okay, all the movies are good. I mean, you can find movies in English, not without that much difficulty in other countries, but they're all going to be in English here. Well, at least the English language movies are. Right?
Yeah, it's great. But what about in Valencia? What about the food? Because I'm interested because I have not been there. It's definitely on our list. We're probably going to go there within the next year or so. But I'm interested as to what it's because you've been to Barcelona too. Those two cities are often closely linked to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, kind of going back to kind of the mode I'm in when I travel, I kind of identify those gluten-free places. I ended up staying within blocks of, and I kind of didn't know this when I booked the place, but a just fantastic gluten-free bakery. And I think I had some really clever name like Panaderia gluten-free or something like that. It's very easy to find on Google. And I always go into a place like that thinking, they won't have much selection, or it's just going to be a bunch of super sweet pastries or things that are obviously gluten-free in the first place. And no, they had everything. Not only did they have like baguettes and rolls and croissants, but they had, what do we call them? Napolitanas. They're kind of like puffy pastries with, and often they have like chocolate or kind of like Nutella stuff on the inside. Just so good because it's so hard to get like pillowy, flaky stuff that's gluten-free. So I got that, and then they had a whole bunch of other stuff like that. They had ones that had like ham and cheese in them, and so I felt like I was eating more traditional Spanish type breakfast food instead of like making like eggs and bacon at home or something like that. And so the other thing is, so Valencia is obviously very famous for paella,
right?
And so they have the rice fields there. That is a gluten-free dish, so I can do well on that. But it tends to be associated with kind of touristy restaurant locations. It's not that easy to find good paella, but you can. And so I did enjoy that. But more than that, and I do enjoy Madrid too. I spent some time in Madrid on this trip. I do enjoy just very typical Spanish tapas, patatas bravas, the ensaladilla rusa, what else? The Spanish tortilla kind of. The little potato omelet things, very simple dishes that go with a glass of beer. And by the way, one thing is, so there is a Superbock, a gluten-free version of Superbock, which is the Portuguese, the biggest Portuguese beer.
Portuguese Budweiser.
It's the Portuguese Budweiser. There is a gluten-free version of that. I just don't care for it very much. I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't be picky, but pretty much every major brewer in Spain does make a gluten-free beer. So like Mau, Estrella Galicia, San Miguel, Cruz Campo, and Dara, Estrella Dam, which is what I'm having now.
Yeah, you got a gluten-free beer.
Yeah, so that's out of Barcelona, I believe.
Okay.
All these are regional beers. So like Mau is Madrid, San Miguel is Malaga, Cruz Campo is Sevilla. All of them, except for Alhambra, I think, it does not make a gluten-free beer, but all the other ones do. So yeah, that's kind of the other thing. It's like it's easy to find just a tapas place where you can have just a really light, very unassuming. I don't know, I'm trying to find the right word. It's a Budweiser type beer experience, but it's nice to have like just a cool, crisp, kind of light beer with the kind of food that the Spanish like to eat as kind of like bar food. The potato items and the fish, the shrimp and the little salads that they make. So I enjoy that too.
This is a Dara, Daura, and this is a gluten-free lager. So it's a light beer. It's not a heavy. It's not a port. It's not a stout.
Yeah, and this one's actually pretty easy to find in the U.S. Frankly, it's been kicking around the U.S. for a long time. You can't really find the other ones I was talking about in the U.S., but I've been able to find Dauda and I think they say Dauda in Barcelona, like that's the Catalan pronunciation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they'll look at you weird if you say Dora or Daura. But if you say Dauda in the U.S., they have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
So you have to pronounce it the right way in the right place. But yeah, so yeah, again, nice, just crisp beer to have on like a warm day, sitting outside on a terrace with some bar food.
And I've never looked for gluten-free beer in the U.S. What's that like? I mean, you mentioned the Spanish beers are relatively easy to find. Are there American brands that have a gluten-free line? What's it like looking for gluten-free beer there?
And again, this has been an 18-year project for me because before I was diagnosed, I was a pretty I was very into the craft beer scene, right? Having grown up, I grew up in Seattle, moved to Portland, and craft beer is a huge thing there. Very into trying like new IPAs, different kinds of ales, farmhouse ales, and then one day I just wasn't allowed to have that anymore, and so it was very challenging for several years. The beers that I was able to find were terrible. Now you can find good craft beers. Portland has like 3 or 4 different breweries that make very good gluten-free craft beer. It's harder to find over here, but I did find one place here in Lisbon that does carry a gluten-free craft beer in cans. That was delicious. I was able to find it in several Spanish cities. I found it in Porto as well. So you can find it. They tend... there are... I think there's one brewed in Barcelona and one in Madrid that I've found. But often the ones that you find here are from... I don't know, one's from New Zealand. One that I've found many times is from New Zealand, of all places. So you can find it here. They're not always brewed locally, though.
So there's actually a guy from Seattle here in Lisbon who started a brewery, who was one of the very first craft breweries. It's called Dos Corvos. And he's from Seattle. I've had him on the podcast before. But I don't know if they have a gluten-free option or not. But a lot of places around here do carry their beer. But he's a Seattleite, and he's become very successful, him and his wife, who's actually from the town where we live in Setúbal. But my question to you, because I really don't know a lot about gluten-free beer, what grain do they use if they're not using wheat? Is it rice? I mean, I don't know what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. It's often rice. Some of the better beers I've had are from sorghum.
Oh, okay.
So you'll often see that. My brother-in-law was a home brewer. I think he still is. And for Christmas, he used to make me a bunch of home-brewed sorghum beer, which at the time was probably the best gluten-free beer I'd ever had. He did it really well. I think if he knew what the industry was going to do, maybe he would have expanded his operations.
Go pro.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've been surprised at the expansion of production and availability of gluten-free beers, at least in the Pacific Northwest and California, I think, and maybe other parts of the U.S. But boy, you could not find it in Las Vegas at all. Just extremely disappointing. So when I get back to like Seattle or Portland or I go to California, I always try to seek out those places.
So this has been an incredible trip for you. I mean, spending a month in Valencia, what a absolute treat. And now spending all this time in Portugal. But tell me, what's next on the docket? Like, is this the end of the trip? You going back to the U.S. after this? And what do you have planned for the future?
Yeah, actually, this is the end of the trip. I've got a little bit less than a week left in Portugal, and then I'm getting back on an airplane. Yeah, I'm on I think they have what do they have? Like a digital nomad visa now, at least in Spain. Yeah. I'm not sure if
they just started it here in Portugal too.
So, I was sort of aware of that. It's not something I intended to do or something I really intend to do. So I'm doing the 90-day typical tourist visa. And so, my 90 days are up. If I stay until Monday, they're going to have to throw me in jail, I think. I don't know what they do. But that's my 90 days. I used my maximum allotted amount of time to really, in a way, what I've been doing is recovering from having lived for a year in Las Vegas, which is kind of a choice. That I wanted to experience what it was like to live in a very car-oriented Sunbelt city, but try to do it car-free, and that's what I did. It was rewarding in a lot of ways and enjoyable, and my YouTube channel grew a lot during that time, so I'll always remember that fondly. But it is hard to try to live in a place like that without a car. And there are some things I genuinely like about Las Vegas, but your ability to accomplish day-to-day tasks without a car or be able to walk around and feel safe, like you're not going to get hit by a car.
Right.
That's not on my list of things that I like about Las Vegas. So I will be returning there, probably just temporarily though, because that's where all my stuff is. Yeah, it's all in a storage locker. Actually, I don't know where it is. It's in some pod somewhere. It's in a pod that they took to an undisclosed location.
Oh my goodness!
So I make a phone call and then it shows up wherever I decide to move to. So that's the plan. Yeah, I'm pretty nomadic right now, and so 90 days on the Iberian Peninsula is kind of part of that nomad life, and then kind of still have to figure out the next step. I have some ideas, but I'm going to keep them under wraps now. I'm just going to keep my own counsel on those.
Okay. Well, we'll be following you on your YouTube channel, City Nerd, and find out what your next plan is. But I would say this: 90 days back in the U.S., we'll see you in 3 months, I guess, right?
that's a possibility, isn't it? I've just really loved my time over here.
There is a digital nomad visa in Portugal. There's also a D7 visa if you're looking to pursue residency and later citizenship, which is what I'm here on, a D7 visa. And I have residency here in Portugal, and if I keep my nose clean and, don't get in any trouble, in 5 years I can apply for citizenship in Portugal, as long as I meet certain requirements, one of which is a certain level of fluency in the language, which has been a challenge to say the least, but I've got another 3.5 years to master that.
Yeah.
Well, Ray Delahanty, City Nerd, thank you so much for being on Destination Eat Drink. I'll let you finish your lunch. It's been great talking to you today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, there you go. Gluten-free beer. I'm going to have to take that one out for a spin. I never even knew it was a thing, but I'll definitely be giving it a try. You can see Ray's entertaining videos on YouTube at City Nerd. I've got links to City Nerd along with Rice Me, the restaurant where we recorded the show, in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED239. Well, that'll do it for this week. Next week, the best of Italy, from the Amalfi Coast to Sicily to the underrated city of Turin in Italy. Don't miss that. And until then, you can get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a brand new video. It's about coffee in Portugal. I try 8 different coffee drinks in one day in Lisbon, including one made with a local moonshine. I also just posted a story about a unique bread in the Alentejo region of Portugal. You can get all that at destinationeatdrink.com. Read about the bread at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. Watch the video by clicking on the videos tab. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to keep up with all the goings-on at Destination Eat Drink headquarters, including the podcast, the videos, the stories. And while you're there, you can also make a contribution to the Destination Eat Drink cause. If you're feeling charitable, just click on the contribution button. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and a guy who only drinks gluten-free scotch, Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.